As the commission went about the rest of their business, as I indicated, I was invited to testify in San Francisco. And interestingly, in addition to testifying, while I was there, I met a man named Michael Aldrich, and he was there testifying along with poet Allen Ginsberg, and they were representing a group at the time known as LEMAR. LEMAR was the earliest pro-legalization group in the country. They were an outgrowth of the Beat generation, and they evolved at one time into a group called Morphia that sold Acapulco Gold rolling papers to support themselves, and they had started just about the same time that we had started NORML on the East Coast. Morphia had started on the West Coast. And so I had my first opportunity to meet the early Morphia people, and at the third hearing, the one in Chicago, among the major witnesses were the two people, Frank Fioramonti and Guy Archer, two young lawyers, who were at that point working to legalize marijuana in New York State, and shortly thereafter they formed New York NORML, and indeed for the next decade they ran NORML in New York, and NORML was one of the first 11 states to decriminalize marijuana in 1977. So now, one other thing about the commission I think is worth noting. We began to realize over the course of those several months, as we spent a little time with the commissioners, that they weren't quite as close-minded as we had expected and as we had been led to believe. And in particular, I was advised at one point that they were holding some private meetings in which they were inviting adult marijuana smokers to sit and smoke marijuana with members of the commission. Most members of the commission had never seen a marijuana cigarette, never seen anyone smoke marijuana, and had no idea how it affected people. So someone had the courage to realize that they probably needed to experience it. They needed to see it, not to smoke it, but to see how people reacted. And they did. They did it on more than one occasion. And apparently that had a real impact. So by the time the commission completed their first year and issued their report, Marijuana: A Signal of Misunderstanding, they had come totally around to our position. And they concluded that the government should eliminate all penalties for the personal possession and use of marijuana, and further, for the not-for-profit transfers of small amounts of marijuana between adults. It wasn't just personal use. They recognized that marijuana smokers tend to share their marijuana. So they indicated that too should be decriminalized. Now, the sad part, of course, is that that report was almost totally ignored by the Congress, as it was by most other authorities at the time. But it also handed over to NORML probably the single most important study that's ever been done on this subject. I think literally, without the Marijuana Commission report that came out in 1972, we would not be on the verge of legalizing marijuana in America today. During the first decade, we managed to decriminalize minor marijuana offenses based on that Marijuana Commission report in 11 states across the country. And frankly, we thought we were close to winning it all. Unfortunately, the mood of the country turned much more conservative by the end of the 1970s, the early 1980s, and along came the Just Say No movement and the Parents movement. And after Nebraska, which was the last of the first 11 states to decriminalize marijuana offenses, I think they did it in 77 or 78, we didn't win another statewide victory for 18 years. It was 1996 when California finally legalized the medical use of marijuana that we finally got back on a winning track in this country. And when you look at the history of the polling that's been done on the legalization of marijuana, you can sort of see that the reason we had 18 years with no victories is because the country was not agreeing with us during that time. We showed increasing support for our position from 1972 until 1979. Then we showed support going down from 1979 until about 1990. And in about 1990, it began to come back in our direction, and that was obviously evidenced by the victory in California in '96. And it's been moving in our direction ever since. And if in fact it continues, if the mood of the country stays in our favor for another 4 or 5 years, we will in fact fully legalize marijuana in a number of states. We're very close to victory. And none of this would have been possible without that marvelous report of the National Commission on Marijuana and Drug Abuse back in March 22nd, 1972.